The trial of Claire Miller. The courtroom was a silent crucible of judgment, its air thick with unspoken accusations. Claire Miller, a woman whose life had been dedicated to caring for two frail boys, sat alone at the defense table. Her hands, which had so often held theirs, trembled in her lap. Dressed in the same simple uniform she wore daily, she looked impossibly small in the grand, intimidating space of the American justice system. On the other side of the aisle sat a man who personified power and influence, Thomas Alistair, his bespoke suit, his calm, collected demeanor, and the two high-priced lawyers flanking him were a stark contrast to Claire's solitary figure. To the world, Thomas Alistair was a philanthropist and a business magnate. His twin sons, Ethan and Liam, were the unfortunate victims of a rare and debilitating illness called spinal muscular atrophy, a cruel condition that slowly stole their ability to move. Their survival hinged on a staggeringly expensive and difficult-to-obtain medication, kept under lock and key in a secure wing of the Alistair mansion. 4 years, Claire had been their caregiver, their constant companion, their mother by heart. She fed them, helped them with their physical therapy, read to them 4 hours, and held their hands through the long, difficult nights. Their bond wasn't one of employer and employee, it was one of deep, familial love. Everything changed on a cold, unforgiving morning. Thomas Alistair summoned Claire to his study. He accused her of a terrible crime, stealing vials of the life-saving medication. His face was cold, his eyes devoid of the warmth she'd seen when he spoke about his children. He simply stated that a number of doses had gone missing, and she was the only one with access. Claire was in a state of shock, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Her denials, her pleas for him to believe in her innocence, were met with an icy stare. "You're just a nanny," he'd said, the words cutting deeper than any knife. "Who is going to believe you over me? My name has weight. My money can buy 1,000 lawyers. You have nothing." The worst part wasn't the fear of prison or public shame. It was the crushing thought that the boys might believe she had betrayed them. She had spent years earning their trust, building a world of safety and love for them. The idea that they might think she'd risk their lives for money was an agony she couldn't bear. The trial began with a flourish of media attention. The prosecution painted Claire as a greedy opportunist who had preyed on a vulnerable family. They laid out their case with meticulous detail. Photos of the empty medicine boxes, a timeline that showed Claire's movements in the house, and testimony from other staff members who claimed she had once mentioned the drugs I caused. This wasn't just theft, the prosecutor declared to the courtroom, his voice ringing with self-righteousness. This was an act that could have led to the deaths of 2 innocent boys. Claire had no lawyer, no one to speak on her behalf. Her court-appointed attorney had failed to show up. When she was finally allowed to speak, her voice was a fragile whisper, trembling with emotion as she insisted on her innocence and spoke of her love for the boys. The judge, however, quickly cut her off, reminding her to stick to the facts, not feelings. The jury seemed to have already made up their minds. To them, she was a stereotype, the poor, opportunistic servant who took advantage of the wealthy family. The prosecutor then presented their smoking gun, a series of text messages, allegedly from Claire's phone, discussing the sale of the medication on the black market. The texts were detailed and convincing, filled with technical jargon and pricing information. Claire stared at the screen in disbelief. She had never sent these messages. Her phone had been broken weeks before, and the records were gone. She saw Thomas Alistair watching her from the other side of the room, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a setup, a meticulously crafted lie designed to bury her. Just as the judge seemed ready to conclude the day's proceedings, a sound at the back of the courtroom made everyone turn. The heavy oak doors creaked open slowly. The room fell into a stunned silence. Making their way down the aisle were Ethan and Liam. One of them, using a small walker, dragged his feet forward with immense effort. His twin, in a motorized wheelchair, steered his way purposefully beside him. Their small, fragile bodies were a testament to their strength and determination. Their presence shattered the courtroom's carefully constructed narrative. The sight of the boys, whom everyone had assumed were too ill to leave their home, brought a human reality to the cold, legal proceedings. Their very existence in that room contradicted every word the prosecution had uttered. They slowly made their way to Claire. The boy with the walker let go, wrapping his arms around her waist in a tearful embrace. The other reached out from his wheelchair, his hand finding hers. Claire's composure crumbled. She held them close, her own tears falling on their small heads. Then, one of them looked at the judge, his eyes red, but resolute. "She never stole anything," he said, his voice small but clear. "She's our mom, Claire. She takes care of us every day." The other boy added, his words a powerful whisper in the silent room. "We saw people touching the boxes. Dad's lawyer. She was there. We tried to tell him, but he said we were confused." The courtroom gasped. Claire looked at Thomas Alistair, whose face, for the first time, had lost its calm facade. He looked panicked, defeated. He shouted at the boys, claiming they were confused, but the judge quickly shut him down. The boys' testimony, raw and unfiltered, cut through the lies and legalese. They didn't have to present evidence or argue points. Their love for Claire and their simple, clear truth were all they needed. The judge, a man who had seen countless trials, was visibly moved. He called a recess to process the shocking new information. Claire, for the first time, felt the weight on her shoulders begin to lift. She was no longer just the accused, she was believed. When the session resumed, the boys were given the floor again. They described how Thomas Alistair's lawyer, a woman named Isabella, had been seen near the medication storage room. The court, now focused on this new lead, started pulling new evidence. They brought in a hospital technician who revealed that Isabella had been overheard attempting to arrange a black market sale of the same type of medication. The documents from Thomas' legal team were re-examined, and it became clear that drug records had been falsified to cover the missing doses. The real thief wasn't Claire, but the woman Thomas had trusted to defend him. Isabella was arrested on the spot. As she was being led away in handcuffs, her face remained cold and emotionless. Thomas Alistair, once so confident and in control, was now a man in disgrace. He looked at Claire, a defeated expression on his face. He mumbled an apology, but it felt hollow, insufficient. "You didn't just hurt me," Claire said, her voice steady and clear despite the tears. "You accused me of something monstrous. You made people believe I would let these boys die for money. How could you ever think that?" He had no answer. He stood there, his proud posture crumbled, his shame a physical presence in the room. The judge's final words rang through the court. "The case against Claire Miller is dismissed." He ordered Thomas Alistair to cover all legal fees and damages, and announced a formal criminal investigation into Isabella Mendez for fraud and illegal drug trafficking. As Claire walked out of the courthouse, holding the hands of the two boys she loved, a new kind of silence fell over the crowd. It wasn't one of judgment, but of respect. The media swarmed them, not for scandal, but for a story of justice and courage. Claire, once a nobody, was now a symbol. She didn't make a statement. She didn't have to. The truth had already spoken for her. She had endured a nightmare and emerged with her integrity intact. She wasn't just a nanny who won a trial. She was a woman who, in the face of immense power and injustice, clung to her truth and was saved by the love of the two boys she called her own. Her story wasn't about revenge. It was about the resilience of the human spirit. It was about how, in the end, love and truth, even in their quietest forms, can shout louder than any lie.